The TrekWorks YouTube channel is sponsored by Tenant Controls, makers of lighting kits, soundboards, and more. Tenant Controls brings your models to life. And by HDA Model Works, suppliers of scale model lighting products, detail parts, and complete model kits. Visit HDAModelWorks.com today. Hello there again, everybody. Boyd here with you, and welcome back to the TrekWorks channel. Well, I guess you guys tune in to see we've got a brand new build series here for you on the channel. This is the build series that we're going to do on the original television show U.F.O, produced by Gerry Anderson from 1969 to 1970. Gerry Anderson's production company also brought us Space 1999 and some of the earlier classic children's television shows such as Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, and Stingray, and many others. And we all remember those shows really fondly from being kids and watching them. This show to me back in the 60s when I was watching these, early 70s, was right up there with Star Trek. I just loved the futuristic look of all these vehicles. The storylines were excellent, and the miniature work was just fantastic. It was so believable and so cool looking. And I fell in love with some of the vehicles on the show. We're going to be building two of the classic kits in studio scale. These are resin garage kits. We're going to build the alien UFO from the TV series, and also that sort of tank-looking vehicle that they cruised around on the ground with looking for UFOs called the Shadow Mobile 1. They had Mobile 1, 2, and 3, plus the Shadow Control vehicle. But we're going to be doing Mobile 1, and it was a really cool-looking vehicle, kind of a armored-looking thing with weapons on it and everything. They'd have these really awesome battles with the UFOs and hunting them down and all that. So these kits are beautiful. They're exact replicas of the original filming miniatures. And I'm just really looking forward to these. I've been saving up my pennies here, waiting to get these kits for a long time. I want to say a shout out to Stan, my fellow modeler from the UK, who I became good friends with. Met Stan in a couple hangouts a year or two ago, and he turned me on to these kits, and I've been wanting them ever since. So they're finally in here now, and I can't wait to get started. This is going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to be working on these kits. Now these kits are resin, and they are, they require a little bit of work. So for those of you out there who are modelers that haven't worked with resin kits before, there's going to be some good modeling tips here for you guys along the way. We're going to show you some of the work you need to do to get them prepped, the parts prepped, do some putty repair on them, get them cleaned up and ready, and then special attention to detail with the painting and everything, because paint doesn't stick to resin as good as it does styrene. So we're going to make sure we cover all that stuff here and make sure everything turns out the way we want it to. So there'll be some good stuff for you guys to see along those lines in this build series. I'm not sure how long the series is going to take. We're just going to kind of take our time. We're going to start off by building the alien UFO kit first here today on the bench. We'll get some basic assembly work done on it, and then in the next part we'll probably go into the painting process. But we're just going to take our time and have a lot of fun. If it takes 5 or it takes 10 episodes, we'll just see what it is when we get there. So sit back, enjoy, guys. We'll be right back, and we'll be on the bench starting to put together the UFO kit first. Be right back, everybody. Okay, well, we've made it over to the bench, and it's time to get things kicked off building our classic UFO model. I am really stoked to get this one going, guys. This is going to be a lot of fun. So we've got all the parts laid out here for you, and as you can see, there's quite a few parts of this kit, even though it is the simpler of the two kits to build, so we decided to do this one first. Some of the parts we have here is we have these vacuum formed domes, and they're done really nice. They need just a little bit of cleaning up. They had these big edges molded around the sides, and I just kind of preliminary took my grinder and cut that off so I can start working my way around and get these cut out and get the edges cleaned up really nice. But the molds are really nice. They don't have any flaws in them or anything. Just a couple really minor little scuffs that I'll be able to clean up with my polishing compound and a nice soft towel. And we'll get those done a little bit later on down the line here. Here we have the center part of the saucer itself, which is 2 pieces. We have the cone shape that has all this rib detail molded into it. which these little arms that come off the center part attach onto, and they have that same basic kind of rib detail going on there. And they're all done really nice. They look nice and clean. They've got some excess parts on here that need to be removed because of the mold process. So we'll get those all cleaned up and ready to go. Here we have the bottom itself, and the bottom has some detail on it with some scribe lines. Basically, they had a paint pattern on the bottom of this. The overall saucer was done in a sort of a polished aluminum, and then they had some black striping, you know, with a gap in between each one, all the way around this perimeter. But these lines are already scribed in place, so we shouldn't have any trouble masking that off and painting that a little bit later. I've already done some preliminary work here. I've drilled out a 3/8 hole here in the bottom with my drill press. That's to mount the model on my base. Now I like to get the base, when I build these models, I like to get the base part of it figured out kind of like right towards the beginning, because that gives me an idea what I want to do. Now this model won't have any wiring going to the inside of it, so I'm going to be just using a standard metal rod for that. And I got the approximate length that I want and everything, so I want to decide how far I wanted to have it sticking up off of the base. And I wanted to get this done fairly early on, because as I start my assembly work and my painting and everything, I want to be able to have something to set the model on and have it nice and stable and secure and all that. And we'll just protect the rest of the base by masking it off or covering it up with paper while we're doing any painting or spraying or anything. And that way we have a nice stable platform to work from, and we won't be scuffing up our paint and all that. So we can kind of get this platform down first and then start working our way up. So going on from there, we're going to be using basic CA glue to put the model together. I find that this gel type CA works really good for resin model kits. I've got quite a few of these resin kits under my belt now, and I'm really happy with this stuff. You always have to keep in mind with CA though that it dries pretty fast, so you want to be sure to get your parts, test fit your parts really good, make sure you're familiar with where they go and everything, and then apply your CA and then get the part on there and get it all lined up nice and square and all that, and then let it dry. So we want to make sure that when we put these vein parts on here and everything, that we get them nice and straight and all that. And this stuff, being that it's a little bit thicker, it doesn't set up quite as quick as the thin stuff does, so I'll have a little bit of time to work with everything as I put each part on, and then we'll just let it dry. So CA works really good for resin model kits. But before we get to any of this assembly work or any of our paint work, we've got to do a little bit of sanding and grinding and cleaning up of these parts. So one thing I want to talk about is a safety thing with working with resin kits. You can see I've got this heavy-duty dust mask here. This is a 3M unit. It's more of a respirator than it is one of those paper dust masks, and I highly recommend that if you're working with any kind of resin where you're going to be creating any kind of powder or dust from sanding or grinding or whatever you're going to do, that you definitely put one of these on first and make sure you keep it on until a little while after you're done with it, so it has a chance to settle out of the air. You don't want to be breathing that stuff in. It's really toxic and can be really bad for you. You might not notice it right away when you're working with it, but believe me, the next day you'll be feeling the effects of it. You'll be coughing and hacking and sneezing, and something I had to learn myself when I first started working with resin kits. And I never go without it now. So one of those cheap little paper masks is not good enough to do the job, guys. You want to go out and get one of these good respirator type masks. You can buy these at Home Depot and Lowe's, and you can find the replacement filters for them there. So I highly, highly recommend that, guys. So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to do our initial prep work on these parts. I've already done a little bit of sanding around the edges of this part here and the bottom of this to get it to where it fits pretty good. But now it's getting time to start doing some putty work and some primer work and all that to make sure everything looks good. So before I do any kind of paint finish work on this model, I want to make sure all these parts are absolutely clean, pristine clean. Now, a lot of times your resin garage kits come with a mold release agent on there, and I can feel it on these parts. It's almost like greasy. They're so slippery that they want to like squirt right out of my hand. So it's really important that we clean these up. And the product that I found that works best for me is just regular Dawn dishwashing liquid. It's really good. It cuts any kind of grease or silicone or anything that might be on there. And we need to mix a little bit of that with some really hot water. So I'm going to take these all inside and put them in a nice pan and get these all scrubbed down and nice and squeaky clean and let them dry for a couple hours. And then I'll be able to start my first paint work. Now, These parts will all need to be scuffed down first. Before I can do any paint work, I'll start off with some adhesion promoter, and then I'll put some primer, and then finally on to my paint process. But these parts have some small little rib details that you can see on that. And I don't want to use regular sandpaper on that because it'll start sanding down some of that detail, and it also won't get down into those recessed areas there very well. So I'm going to use some double-aught steel wool for doing this. It won't remove much of the material because we're not trying to remove a lot of material. We're just trying to scuff it up. We're just trying to give it a nice little scratched up surface so that our paint will have something to grab onto. Now, we're not going to be doing a lot of masking on this one. So it's not quite that important as it is if, on a model where you're going to be doing a lot of taping and masking and pulling the tape back off and on. That's when you really have to worry about your paint being torn off. But we do have a little bit of that to do here around the bottom of this part, and then this little piece right here that goes on the top of the saucer is done in a sort of a transparent green over the top of this kind of polished aluminum finish that we're going to be putting on this. So I want to make sure all these parts are nice and clean and sanded, and we'll take the paint and it'll stay on there once we put it on there. There's nothing worse than having your paint peel off after you've put a nice thick layer of primer and paint, and you wind up with a big, gouge looking spot on there, and it takes hours to go back and fix it. So we'll try to avoid that just by doing some careful prep work. And it's even more important on these resin kits than it is on your regular styrene model kits. Resin has always been harder for paint to stick to. So with that said, guys, I'm going to take a quick break. I'll take these parts all inside, get them all cleaned and washed up, and then we're going to come back and start doing some initial assembly. We're going to get the cone mounted down onto the bottom of the base here, and get our little piece put on the top here, and then we're going to start putting on these little vanes. We're going to have to get these parts cleaned up and removed from these molding blocks and then start working our way around. So we'll just do a little bit at a time, but I'll be right back with that after I get the parts all cleaned up, guys. Be right back. Okay, I'm back, everybody, and about 2 hours later or so, I got all these parts washed up and cleaned up. We used some really hot water and Dawn dishwashing liquid, and everything came out really good. I don't feel all that kind of slimy feel on the parts anymore, so I think we got rid of that mold release agent. And again, that's a really, really important step to do if you want your paint to come out good and stick on there really good. So I've taken some steel wool, and I've just gone over all these parts after that. Double-aught steel wool, like I mentioned, it'll get down in these little areas here where these ribs and everything are and get that nice and scuffed up and everything. So I did everything except these little paddles. I'm going to do that a little bit later because we're going to put those on last. But this piece here, the bottom piece, everything that you see out here has all been done. Now, I started doing some basic assembly here. I've glued this part of the cone down to the lower half of the saucer, and I had to grind off some of the excess resin on the bottom of this piece here to get it to sit nice and flat. And then I had to make sure it was centered. And also there's these different size ribs that are on this, and these wider ones I figured out were the ones that are supposed to line up with these slots that you see put into the top edge of the saucer here. And that's to accommodate these arms or vanes that come off the side. So they sit down in that little slot, and then you've got a nice equal sized, the width is the same as these pieces that they glue onto. So we're ready to start gluing all these on. There's going to be 16 of these that have to be glued on. But before I do that, as I said at the top of the show, I want to get my base figured out. So I can set this on my base, and when I start gluing these on, I can just kind of work my way around it and have a nice stable platform to work with and not have to worry about it tipping over or breaking something off. So I've got a wood base I've got prepared. I've glued a little piece of MDF on the bottom of that, and I'm going to talk about how I did all that, and we're going to take that over to the drill press and get that drilled so we can put our mounting rod in it and have that ready to go. Then we'll come back over to the bench here and go ahead and put the rest of our these arms on it, and then I'm going to stop with the assembly at that point, and we're going to get it all primered and everything and see how it all looks. Now this small little edge here on the bottom of the saucer, it did also have a few little micro pits in it that you see is kind of typical on a resin casting. So I just took some 320 grit sandpaper and just went around it, and smoothed it out as best as I could. And then whatever there was left of the small little pits, I filled in with some of the red spot putty there. And then I sanded it once more with some 320, so we've got that pretty worked out. I'll be able to see how it looks a little bit better once we put a coat of primer down on it. But so we've went over all the parts with this steel wool and scuffed them up just a little bit to give a nice, scuffed up surface for primer to take hold. So we're ready to go. I've done that on all these parts here. I haven't done these little pieces yet because we're going to save those towards the end. Now I've decided I'm going to paint this with some Vallejo metal color paint that I have here. This is an acrylic based, water-based paint. It's chrome, but the experimenting that I've done with it, it doesn't really look like, you know, spectacular chrome, but it is a really nice bright metallic finish. So I think that's going to be fine for the main part of the body of the saucer here and these arms that come off. And then I'm going to see how it looks on these little paddles here, but if I don't like it, I'm going to either use some metal foil that I have in chrome, or I'm going to go over and get some all-clad chrome and spray it on there. We're just going to have to kind of cross that bridge when we get to it. I want those to look really, really bright and shiny like realistic chrome, because that's how they had the effect on the studio model for that lighting purpose. So let's go ahead and get over to the drill press, and we'll show you working on the base, and then we'll come back here just after that and keep moving on. All right, so we've been doing some preliminary work on the model itself, getting some of the basic assembly done. So as I mentioned there at the top, I like to get my base ready and prepared so that we have something to place the model on and have it nice and stable while we're doing our work, and don't have to worry about, you know, damaging it or scraping up our paint and stuff like that. So I just went out and bought one of these little simple wooden bases again from Hobby Lobby. It's just I think it's made out of basswood or whatever, but it'll look pretty decent when we put a little coat of paint on it. Now on the back side here, I took a little piece of this high density material called MDF. It's just basically high density particle board. It's some pretty strong stuff, and I glued it to the back of this so we have some, you know, additional thickness. And I'm going to drill into this so we have a place to put our mounting rod. Now I've measured this. It's 9 by 6 inches, so we're going to have a center here of 4.5 by 3, so I've got that centered there. So we're just going to drill straight into it. I've got a 3/8 drill bit here. Now I like to use this drill press because that way I've got a nice level table here, and I'm drilling straight down into it without wobbling or moving around that you would normally do with a you know, a hand drill bit or something like that, or a hand electric drill. If you don't have one of these, you know, you can just do the best job you can. The newer drills have a you know, a centering bubble in them, so you'll just have to work with that. But this is what I like to use. So here we go. I'm going to drill this out real quick. I'm going to take it nice and slow. Just get my hole started so I hopefully don't rip a big chunk out of the wood first. Okay, you can see that changed color there, so we're definitely into the MDF. I just want to go all the way through, and then we'll call it a day here. Pretty happy with that. I got my hole nice and clean. Didn't get any tearing of the wood that can sometimes happen with this softer wood. So I've got my 3/8 rod here. I'll just kind of test fit it. Let me get it down in there a little ways. Make sure it's nice and stable, it's nice and tight. So there we go. That's the rod we're going to be using. Now, the reason I drilled it all the way through is I want to be able to maybe move this up and down a little bit to see the overall height that I want to have my my model sitting on top of this. I don't want it to be up way too high or to look like sitting on top of a Christmas tree, and I don't want it too low either because I want to be able to see some of that detail on the bottom. So that's going to be it. So now we got a nice little platform. I'll just use some epoxy and glue this on, and we're going to paint this rod black. Of course, I'll scuff it up a little bit, and we'll paint it black so you don't see it, and then we'll mount our little model on the top of that, and we're all working along here. So there you go, guys. That's how I do that. Let's get back over to the bench now and do some more assembly work on the model itself. All right, so here we are again, everyone, and you can see we've got our base sitting here after we did our work over on the drill press. Got our mounting rod installed. Now I've got the model basically sitting on the top of it, and I haven't glued anything yet, so we can spin this whole thing around. I think I'm going to leave it that way anyway. It sits really nice and solid on here. So now we can go ahead and move forward and start gluing our little arms on here. And I've got my CA glue all ready to go, so I've got a nice solid platform to work with now. I should be able to get this done without having any problems. So we're just going to take and start gluing some of these on. I'm not going to take you through this whole thing. It'll take a little while, but we'll show you a few of them going on here. I'm just going to put a couple drops of CA glue on the part there on the back and on the bottom, and we'll get one of them put on. This lines up pretty good. And I just want to make sure I'm coming out nice and straight on these parts. The slot there on the bottom helps you to line it up and get it nice and straight, so that's the main thing we're worried about here. So we've got our first one down there. Go ahead for number 2 here. As you can see, the CA glue doesn't set up instantly, but it gives you kind of a, it tacks down on there pretty good just at first, so the part will hold, and you got a little bit of time to move it around a little bit. So it's actually working out pretty good so far. Now these first 2 look like they're lined up nice and straight. Looks pretty good. I'm just using just a tiny little bit of glue. I'm not putting a big bead on here, just a couple drops. And then I'm spreading it out kind of on the back side here a little bit. Don't need a lot. It sticks really, really good to this resin. Of course, we don't want a big blob of glue coming out around the edges and showing up either, because as you modelers out there know, when you're working with paints that are going to be a bright metallic finish like what we're going to have on this, everything has to look really clean, otherwise you'll see all the imperfections, and that's, bright silver is really bad about that, showing any kind of flaws, so we want this to look really nice. But you can see we've got nice even spacing going on there. It's already starting to look really cool, I gotta say that. This is going to be a really neat model. And can't wait to do the paint job on it. That's always the fun part. Trying to make sure, just kind of eyeballing it here to make sure that spacing's all looking pretty even. Looks pretty good. We'll do one more here, and then I'll give you guys a pause, and I'll continue on and get these all put down, and we'll come back and show you how that looks. And then we're going to do our primer, our initial painting work here. So I'm going to do the adhesion promoter on this first, and then we'll prime it with some regular gray, and then it's going to get painted a black. I'll use some of my Speedsecker black paint, and then we'll put a gloss coat on that, and then we'll be able to have it prepared and ready to use. I wanted to show you this up close a little earlier. This is the Vallejo acrylic-based metal color in chrome. As I said, I'm not expecting to get a really bright chrome finish out of this like some of the other ones that I've used. I tried this stuff out, and it looks more like a polished aluminum to me, is what I'll say, but that'll be fine for like I said, the main body on this part. I'll be happy with that, and it'll actually kind of look cool, that it won't be, the color on this might be a little different than it is on these paddles that go here, and you can kind of see that this is what they're going to look like. I'll just kind of hold one on there, something like that. And they vary, like this one, you start off here up, and the next one is supposed to be down, like that. So I can see how that would have gave a really cool effect in the light when it was spinning and everything. So anyway, let me go ahead and get the rest of these put on, and then we'll come back and we'll show you where we're at, and we'll go forward from there. Be right back, everybody. All right, we're back with you once more, and you can see we've got all the little vane pieces put on our UFO body here. It's starting to really look like the vehicle that we're familiar with from the show now. It looks pretty cool. You can see we've got everything lined up nice and straight. I glued the top piece on here now too. So we're going to stop at this point with the assembly, and I'm going to be going over and getting my adhesion promoter laid down on this first, and then my primer, and then I'm going to be spraying this down with a coat of black, and then we'll top coat that with some gloss coat, and it'll be all ready for our chrome finish, and we'll see how that turns out. So in the next video you'll see, I'll come back and I'll have all this prepared and ready to go, and we'll start doing our actual painting work on this. I'll get the whole body sprayed in silver, then we'll go to the bottom and do our black stripes, and then we'll finish up by doing our chrome detailing on these paddle pieces. In the meantime too, one thing I wanted to show you guys is I worked on the dome here. I've got it kind of roughed out, and I've got the holes opened up on the top where it sits, and we've got these little kind of pieces that glue down on the top of that. I've still got to clean up the bottom edge just a little bit, but this gives you an idea of how it will look. We've got to paint that green color in there once we're going to use some Tamiya transparent green around that ring there after we get the chrome down on there first, and that'll give it the look that it's supposed to have. I've also been working on the bottom dome that goes, facing upward, that winds up just underneath of the edges of these. So it's looking good. I'm really happy with it. So hope you enjoyed following along so far. Everything's working out just fine. So we'll be back in a couple more days and get the thing painted next. All right. So we'll see you then, everybody. Take care out there, and happy modeling, everyone.